The courtroom was packed when the judge announced that the company built by one ordinary single father was only hours away from being taken away. Across the room, powerful attorneys smiled as if the outcome had already been decided. The company's founder, Elias Mercer, sat silently at the defense table, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at the documents that could erase everything he had spent 15 years building. Then the courtroom doors opened. A young woman in a navy blue suit stepped inside carrying a thin leather folder. She looked calm, confident, and completely certain of where she belonged. Elias looked up. His breath caught. He knew that face. 15 years earlier, she had been a frightened homeless girl sitting alone outside a grocery store. Now she was the person standing between him and the destruction of his entire empire. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales. Sometimes one small act of kindness can change an entire life. 15 years earlier, Elias Mercer had never imagined becoming a father again. He was 38, raising his 8-year-old son, Jonah, alone after losing his wife to an illness that had changed their family forever. Elias worked long hours repairing commercial equipment during the day and managed a small delivery business in the evenings. He was not rich. His house was modest, his car was old, and every month required careful planning. But Elias had learned something after losing his wife: children did not need a perfect life. They needed someone who would stay. One bright afternoon in early spring, Elias stopped outside a neighborhood grocery store with Jonah. While Jonah waited near the entrance, Elias noticed a girl sitting on a cardboard box beside the wall. She looked about 10 years old. Her clothes were worn, her backpack was torn, and she held a small notebook tightly against her chest. Most people walked past her. Elias almost did too. Then he noticed the girl watching a little boy inside the store laughing with his father. There was something in her expression that made Elias stop. He walked over and gently asked whether she needed something to eat. The girl hesitated before quietly accepting a sandwich and a bottle of water. Elias learned that her name was Mara Ellison. She had been moving between temporary shelters and public places since losing contact with the relatives who had once cared for her. Elias immediately contacted the appropriate local child welfare authorities. He did not simply take her home or pretend he could solve everything himself. He followed every legal step, attended meetings, completed the required checks, and waited. During that process, Mara slowly began trusting him. Jonah was the first person to make her laugh. He showed her his collection of model airplanes, and Mara surprised him by understanding how several of them worked. She loved drawing machines and writing little ideas in her notebook. Elias soon discovered that she had an extraordinary ability to understand numbers and patterns. Months later, after the proper legal process, Elias became Mara's foster parent, and eventually her adoptive father. The first evening Mara moved into their home, she stood in the hallway holding a small bag of clothes. She looked uncertain, almost as if she expected someone to tell her she could not stay. Elias simply showed her the bedroom that had been prepared for her. There was a desk beside the window, a bookshelf, and a small lamp. For the first few nights, Mara barely slept. She was accustomed to uncertainty. Every strange sound made her nervous. Every morning she checked whether her belongings were still there. Elias never pressured her. Instead, he showed her through ordinary things that she was safe. Breakfast before school. A jacket when it was cold. A ride when it rained. A father who remembered her favorite cereal. Slowly, Mara changed. Her grades improved. She joined the school science club. She began entering mathematics competitions. Jonah became her closest friend, and Elias watched with quiet pride as the girl who once avoided eye contact began speaking confidently in front of classrooms. Meanwhile, Elias's small delivery business began struggling. A large competitor entered the area and offered prices Elias could not match. Within months, several clients left. Elias faced a difficult decision. He could close the company and find another job, or he could try something new. Mara, now 11, noticed stacks of invoices and business papers covering the kitchen table. One afternoon, she quietly pointed out that several routes were costing the company more money than they earned. Elias checked her calculations. She was right. That discovery became the beginning of something extraordinary. Elias redesigned his delivery routes, reduced wasted fuel, and created a simple scheduling system. The company began recovering. Mara's ideas became more sophisticated as she grew older. By 16, she was building spreadsheets. By 18, she was studying business analytics. By 20, she had earned scholarships and graduated near the top of her class. Elias's company had also transformed. What began as a tiny delivery operation had become Mercer Logistics, a respected regional company employing hundreds of people. Yet Elias never forgot where everything began. He still kept Mara's first notebook in a drawer beside his desk. Years passed. Mara eventually moved to another city for graduate studies, but she called Elias almost every evening. Their relationship remained stronger than ever. Then, one Tuesday morning, everything changed. Elias received a legal notice accusing Mercer Logistics of financial misconduct and fraudulent reporting. He was stunned. The documents appeared legitimate. Bank records, contracts, internal emails, and accounting reports seemed to show that millions of dollars had been improperly transferred from company accounts. Elias knew he had never authorized such transactions. But evidence on paper could be devastating. Within days, investors began withdrawing support. The company's board demanded an emergency investigation. Several executives resigned. News reporters gathered outside the headquarters. Elias spent long hours with his attorneys trying to understand what had happened. Someone had carefully constructed a case against him. And whoever had done it understood the company's financial systems extremely well. The investigation eventually pointed toward Victor Holden, a senior executive who had worked beside Elias for years. But Victor had prepared an elaborate defense. He claimed Elias had personally approved every transaction. The evidence looked convincing. Soon, the matter reached court. On the morning of the hearing, Elias sat at the defense table exhausted. He had barely slept for weeks. His attorney warned him that if the court accepted the opposing side's evidence, Mercer Logistics could be placed under external control and Elias could lose the company he had built from nothing. Elias looked across the courtroom at Victor. For the first time in 15 years, he felt completely powerless. Then the doors opened. Mara walked in. She was no longer the frightened girl from outside the grocery store. She was 25, professionally dressed, carrying a folder filled with documents. Elias stared at her in disbelief. She walked directly toward him. The judge recognized her as an expert witness and allowed her to present evidence after reviewing her qualifications. Mara had spent the previous 2 weeks analyzing the company's financial records. She had discovered something everyone else had missed. The fraudulent transactions were real, but they had not originated from Elias's authorized system. They had been created through an old administrative access pathway that had supposedly been disabled years earlier. Mara had traced the digital records and found that the access had been repeatedly used late at night. Then she found the crucial connection. The same authorization pattern appeared in internal documents associated with Victor Holden. The courtroom grew silent as Mara presented the evidence. She explained the financial trail carefully, using simple charts and verified records. She showed how the transactions had been disguised as legitimate operational expenses, then redirected through shell vendors. Most importantly, she presented archived system logs proving that Elias had not been present when the approvals were made. Victor's confidence disappeared. His attorneys requested a recess. But Mara was not finished. She produced one final document. It was a signed internal memo from months earlier showing that Victor had requested access to an administrative account and had falsely claimed it was necessary for emergency operations. The memo had been preserved in an old company archive. The evidence changed everything. The court ordered a deeper investigation, and the accusations against Elias began collapsing one after another. Within weeks, investigators uncovered the full scheme. Victor had been secretly diverting company funds through fake suppliers and had constructed the false evidence to make Elias appear responsible. Mercer Logistics survived. But Elias barely cared about the company anymore. When he stepped outside the courthouse that afternoon, he saw Mara waiting for him beneath the bright afternoon sky. For a moment, neither said anything. Then Elias smiled. He told her that she had saved everything he had built. Mara shook her head. She reminded him that he had saved her first. Years ago, when everyone else had walked past a homeless child sitting outside a grocery store, Elias had stopped. He had offered food. Then he had offered patience. Then a home. Then a family. And eventually, he had given her something even more valuable, the belief that her future could be different from her past. Mara explained that she had not entered that courtroom because she felt she owed him a debt. She had done it because he was her father. Elias struggled to hold back tears. He looked at the successful young woman standing before him and realized that the greatest thing he had ever built was not Mercer Logistics. It was a family. Over the following months, Mara accepted a leadership position within the company. She helped strengthen its financial systems and created a scholarship program for young people who had experienced homelessness or unstable housing. Elias supported the idea immediately. Every year, the company would provide education grants, mentorship, and career opportunities to students who simply needed someone to believe in them. The old grocery store where Elias had first met Mara was still there. Years later, they visited it together. Mara stood outside the same wall where she had once sat on a cardboard box. She looked at her father and smiled. Elias realized that the moment he had considered insignificant had become the turning point of both their lives. A sandwich. A conversation. A little patience. That was all it took to begin a 15-year journey. And perhaps that was the real lesson. Sometimes we imagine that changing someone's life requires wealth, power, or extraordinary talent. But sometimes it begins with simply noticing someone who feels invisible. Sometimes kindness does not immediately come back to us. Sometimes it takes years. But when it does, it can return in ways we never imagined. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales for more emotional stories about kindness, family, courage, and hope. And before the story ends, special request, comment, kindness always returns, if you believe one small act of kindness can change a life. 15 years earlier, Elias had stopped because he saw a lonely child who needed someone. 15 years later, that same child walked into a courtroom and stood beside the man who had given her a home. Elias had once believed he was rescuing Mara. But in the end, he discovered something far more beautiful. They had saved each other.